You know, every year on February 14th, we see the hearts, the cards, the flowers, the whole shebang. But have you ever really stopped to think about where it all started? Because the real story, well, it's way more dramatic and defiant than you'd ever guess. So let's get into the incredible legacy of one man who stood for love.
Just think about back for a second. What if telling someone you wanted to spend your life with them was actually against the law? This isn't just some crazy hypothetical. For some people, in a very real time and place, this was their reality.
So picture this. We're in ancient Rome. It's a world run by a super powerful emperor with some very strict rules. And this emperor, he had one big goal: to build the most unbeatable army in the world. And he had a, let's say, interesting theory on how to do that. And right here, this is where it all comes to a head. On one side, you've got the emperor's logic. Single men make better soldiers. No distractions, no families to worry about, so boom, young men are forbidden to get married. But on the other side, you've got this quiet priest named Valentine, who believed that no, love is sacred. And a union between two hearts, that's a blessing, not a barrier to duty. You can just imagine the effect this had, right? It was immediate and honestly kind of chilling. All the joy and celebration that comes with weddings, gone. Just vanished from public life. Couples had to make promises in secret, and the very act of falling in love became this dangerous thing you only whispered about. But as we all know, you can't just outlaw love. It always finds a way. And in this story, its champion was Valentine. He just couldn't sit back and watch this happen. He decided he had to do something, even though he knew the risk was absolutely massive. So a quiet little rebellion started, all under the cover of darkness. After the city went to sleep, young couples would sneak through the streets to Valentine's chapel. And there, just by the flicker of candlelight, he'd join their hands, speak the blessing softly, and marry them, in complete defiance of the emperor. And that, right there, just nails what he was doing, doesn't it? This wasn't just about breaking some rule for the sake of it. For Valentine, this was about defending the very idea of love from a government that was trying to crush it with fear. He was standing up for something bigger. Of course, secrets like this don't stay secret forever. One night, the emperor's soldiers stormed the chapel. Valentine was arrested for his crimes and thrown into a dark, cold prison. Now, you'd think the story ends there, right? But in a funny way, this is where the next part begins. Even in a place as bleak as a Roman prison, a new connection started to form. See, the jailer had a daughter, and she would visit Valentine, bringing him food, but more than that, just company. She was fascinated by his courage, and he was really touched by her simple kindness. What grew between them wasn't some grand, sweeping romance. No, it was something much quieter, much more tender. It was a real human bond, formed through the iron bars of a cell, and it was built on nothing more than courage and kindness in the face of absolute despair. And this leads us to the most famous part of the whole story. Valentine's defiance meant his fate was sealed. He was sentenced to be executed. But on his final night, he was about to do something that would echo through history for thousands of years. His time was almost up, and his last request was so simple. Not a pardon, not a fancy meal, just some paper and a little ink. His mind was clear. He had one last thing he needed to do. He wasn't writing some big speech or a final sermon to the world. He was just writing a simple, personal thank you note. It was for the jailer's daughter, the one person who had showed him a bit of light and human connection when he had absolutely nothing else left. He didn't sign it with a long farewell. He just wrote 3 little words. Words that would become legendary. From your Valentine. That was it. The very first Valentine's message ever. The next day, February 14th, Valentine was killed. And that should have been the end. But as we all know, his story was nowhere near over. In fact, his death wasn't an ending at all. It was the seed of a legacy that was about to grow and grow for centuries. Think about it. His execution on February 14th could have just been another tragic day lost to history. But as the centuries went by, the story of this priest who died for love, it started to spread. People remembered him. And slowly, the date of his death transformed from a day of mourning into a day to celebrate the very thing he gave his life for. So today, every single time we give a card or write a note or say, "Hey, be my Valentine," we are
probably without even realizing it, taking part in that ancient story. We're echoing that final, quiet act of gratitude and defiance that came from a prison cell in Rome. It's pretty amazing.
So what's the big takeaway here? The story of St. Valentine isn't just about hearts and flowers. It's really a story about incredible courage in the face of fear. It's about being devoted to a principle that you believe is more important than the law. And at its heart, it's about the powerful idea that love is a choice that's worth protecting, especially when it's hard. And that kind of leaves us with one final thought, doesn't it? This one man's story turned a regular date on the calendar into a worldwide celebration of connection. And it makes you ask yourself a pretty timeless question. In your own life, what is love truly worth?